And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing somebody who I believe really knows how to vocalize this work well, somebody who's thoughtful, who's kind, but also very forthcoming, and her candor and her precision is top notch. And so she is a licensed minister and a former public school educator who's working at the intersections of faith and justice. And of course, shout outs to the Expectations Project. She is a director of advocacy and training for Expectations, but also just somebody who really loves and cares about our children, our passions, and our people. So I'd like everyone to give a warm welcome to Cami King, who will introduce everybody else on screen. Thanks, Cami.
Thank you, Jose. What a wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I have to exhale after every single session. They're so amazing. This has been such as my first EduColor Summit, and like it's been so nurturing and nourishing. And I'm just so excited to continue with this conversation. So thank you. Hello to you all. Jose has already introduced me, so I will not go back and do that. I want to welcome you to our session 4, which is called Why the Truth Matters. And a little contexting for what we're going to do here. The panel who you're going to meet came up with this contexting for the conversation that we're going to have. And so I'm going to just read it for you really quick. Given the most recent attacks on education, the ability for students to think critically and honestly about what they are learning is of profound importance, right? This has already come out in our conversations today. So how we shift and provide protection for truth telling in the classroom can be key to sustainable, thoughtful learning environments. And so we're going to talk a little bit about why the truth matters. And I want to just introduce our panel. So let's bring them on in. I'm going to read their bios as already warned them in advance because I'm just meeting them. I was like, I'm going to read your bio, which always makes me very like nervous and uncomfortable. So hopefully they'll endure us reading their bios. I want you to know who you're talking to today. So the first person we have here with us is Daisy Hahn of Embracing Equity. She's a nationally recognized anti-racist educator, speaker, and activist. She founded Embracing Equity to be the educator, the teacher she wished she'd had. And throughout her career, Daisy has combined her expertise in experiential curriculum design and adult learning with her experience as a teacher, principal, instructional coach, and organizational leader for positive social change. She also taught a year-long course called Leading for Equity at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where she paired students with district practitioners to institute systemic change. And above all of these things, Daisy has lived her life and built her career on the belief that education has the power to nurture resistance and dismantle systems of oppression. Welcome, Daisy. We are so excited to hear from you. We also,
so honored to be here. Thank you, Kim.
Welcome. We also have Matthew Kay with us. He's a Philadelphia educator and author of Not Light But Fire. Matthew is a proud product of Philadelphia's public schools and a founding teacher at Science Leadership Academy. He's a graduate of Westchester University and holds a master's in educational leadership from California University of Pennsylvania. At SLA, he teaches an innovative, inquiry-driven, project-based curriculum. And he's also the founder and executive director of Philly Slam League, which is a nonprofit organization that shows young people the power of their voices through weekly spoken word competition. And this is the only season-long school-based slam poetry league in the United States. So we're so grateful for that awesome work that y'all are doing over there, Matthew. And so he deeply believes in the importance of earnest and mindful classroom conversations about race, and that any teacher who is willing to put in the hard work of reflection can, through practice of discrete skills, become a better discussion leader. He is passionate about designing professional development that teachers find valuable. Welcome, Matthew. It's so great to have you here with us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. And last but certainly not least, we have Gabriela Lopez, who is the most recent former president of the San Francisco School Board. Welcome, Gabriela. She is a young Latina with 10 plus years of education experience and a master's of education from UCLA. At 28, becoming the youngest woman ever elected to office in San Francisco. And during her tenure, she was also elected president for 2 terms, which had not been done before. And she is now preparing to begin her PhD in education at Stanford University in race, inequality, and language in education. So welcome, Gabriela. We're so glad to have you here. So we're going to have a little chat today about why the truth matters. And I'm going to talk just a little bit longer. I'm going to turn it over to you all because I want to hear what y'all have to say. This is what I'm most excited about. I want to just a little bit introduce my intersection with EduColor and how I first came to know EduColor's work. And it was through my work at TEP. We actually partnered in a campaign called Truth Matters for Students. And so last year, when all of the craziness was going on, that is still going on in the anti-truth movement, where teachers were being disempowered from teaching and students were being denied access to accurate portrayals of history and any kind of anti-racist classroom environments. Jose and the president of our organization, Zakia, had a meeting of the minds on social media where they were like, what are we going to do about this? Like, we are not going to stand for this. And so together they formed a group of folks to just brainstorm how to support teachers, students, parents, community members in really resisting the anti-truth movement. And out of that, the campaign Truth Matters for Students was born. And I got to work on that. And this is a huge passion project for us at TEP because we love what we call, or organizations that exercise what we call the prophetic voice, which is where they speak clearly and truthfully into the public discourse around issues of justice and equity. And EduColor, of course, as we have all seen today, is definitely doing that. And so this panel and this conversation is just speaking into, a continuation of that conversation that we've been having of, why the truth matters for our students to receive quality education, why it matters that we really resist the anti-truth movement, how we understand what's going on in the movement, which is a lot of what our campaign was about, was kind of decoding all the narrative and helping folks to understand what's really going on, what's behind all of this, why this is happening, and how we can effectively resist it and ensure students have access to what they need. So let's continue that conversation. Okay, sound good? Y'all with me? Okay, so I want to just start with a simple question that we agreed upon as we were planning this panel, which is, why does the truth matter? Right? And so from your context, the context of your work in education, your vantage point, what would you say is at stake, right, in this anti-truth movement? Why is the truth under attack? Anyone can start.
I'll begin just kind of building on my experience with K through 12 education. When I think about why the truth matters, with respect to what's taught, the truth has been kept from us. So I watched and engaged in conversations with young people as young as 7, 8 years old and brought up these really important discussions and topics that are usually not taught in our own education. In my own experience, I learned a lot when I had the opportunity to go to higher education and learn about myself and learn about my histories. But again, there's privilege with that. So when I'm having deep conversations with young people, I realize this is so valuable, so important, and it's the most authentic conversations I can have with people. As I compare that to my work that has evolved over time, more and more I'm engaging with adults, and I see that contrast. I see how we have been taught to behave a certain way, respond a certain way to what we're hearing. And I really want to build a world where we can begin that early on so that when we have these discussions, it's not fueled with rage and the response that we've been seeing in the last couple of years, especially.
For me, what's at stake is nothing short of our humanity. When we're not actually telling the truth and willing to face the truth of our collective history, then there is no possibility to have a humanity that is connected and truly looking toward imagining a more just and equitable future. And so this anti-truth movement is extremely dangerous and requires collective action to stand up and say, the white grievances around even calling out racism, just the discomfort around calling out racism, that is not racist. That is required in order to get to what Brian Stevenson calls reconciliation, right? We can't have peace. We can't have a more unified society if we are avoiding and actively erasing the truth.
I think one of the things that makes truth matter, especially now, is a lot of the anti-truth movement is also a practice in just systemically underselling what kids are capable of. Like, and it says this kid can't handle this conversation. This kid can't handle this lens. This kid can't handle. And the wild thing is that these people are saying that about their own children. Like, don't teach my kid this. Almost like they're saying their kid is too dumb to handle this very simple idea that a person can be a founding father with a couple good ideas and also a slave owner. That is horrible. Like, that is not complex. That is not hard. But people are constantly selling their own children short, not just, children that look like me, but their own kids. They're saying, like, my kid can't handle this. And I think truth matters because it, among all the other things, it just means that we trust kids. And it means that we can teach kids to have a relationship with their education that lying to them does not encourage. Like, they're not going to be scholars if all they're learning is lies, because lies are boring. Like, lies are not interesting. Lies do not bring out the inquiry. And so I think among all the things, it's just, not saying that everything hard is too hard for our kids. And I think there's a whole lot of that going on now. My kids can't handle this.
Right. Really, it's the adults can't handle it.
Yeah. Your kids can do just fine. They got it. This is not hard.
Right.
But, that's the wild thing that just, it really gets me. These people are just selling their own children so short. Like, they can't handle this.
That's so good. Yeah, one of the things it makes me think of when you say it shows that we don't trust our kids, our students, it also shows that we don't trust teachers. And one of the things that came up a lot for us in our campaign was the importance of restoring the dignity or giving dignity to teachers, to the profession of teaching, that teachers are equipped to exercise their craft in the classroom in partnership with parents and communities and students, and controlling that just shows what we believe about teachers and about the profession of teaching, the lack of respect and dignity that as a society we have for teachers. And so some of the conversations we had earlier made me think of this as well, just how important it is to do that. So that's really helpful. I don't know if this is a helpful question, so if not, you guys can redirect it. But one of the things I wanted to ask is, it might be an obvious question, but we often talk about the ways that truth is under attack, right? The how we read in the newsreels of what is going on and what are the unique tactics that people are employing to, advance this anti-truth movement. But one of the things that we found ourselves having to talk about a lot was the why. Like, why are people doing this? Like you just said, all of the reasons why the truth matters. So why would one come against it? Why are we wanting to cultivate unlearned, student body, right? What is the motivations behind that? Sometimes I wonder if that's important for us to remember because it helps us to address what's really going on in a more effective way. What do you guys think about that?
I've actually have had that perspective because I want to be able to reflect on exactly why that is. There are people there who inherently believe that we and this movement are wrong, and they've been taught that and they've benefited from it. So it's helpful for me to be able to reflect that understanding. And then we get to what Matthew, you brought up about educating teachers and adults to be able to have that reflection, to be able to hold that and understand that. But it's a hard truth. I think especially when we bring up racism, Daisy, you mentioned this earlier, no one even wants to hear the word because it's so painful to believe that you have these biases or that you can be full of hate and feel like you're not. So I think when for people who truly feel bad about having these conversations, I think that they've also not benefited from learning about our true history. They haven't been taught that, but they have benefited from white privilege or any privilege that has put them on top. So then there are the people who are actually full of hate, who don't want these things to shift, who don't want young people of color benefiting from this because it's impactful and it's empowering and it's going to help us move forward. And there's a generation of folks, a generation of white folks who don't want that to happen.
I'm not really in the habit of giving anti-truthers like the benefit of the doubt. I think there's a lot of just badness happening. However, I was thinking last year, so I co-teach in a room with my principal who taught a philosophy course. And he spent about a month going into religion, just like discussing religion from an academic point of view. These are different religions. This is where they come from, blah, blah, blah. In a way that I can imagine if you were a person of faith having your kid in that class, that would be really on the edge of uncomfortable. But like, these are things I kind of like engaging in within my culture, like in Sunday school or in the mosque or in the, like, I don't like these being discussed in an academic, incisive, asking all the hard questions kind of way. And though I still think 99% of the stuff is just hardcore bad guy racism, like capital R, blah, blah, blah. I never think we should overcomplicate things. I do think that there's a part of a big portion of this country for whom patriotism and white supremacy is religious. And they do not, an exploration of that using academic tools like inquiry and stuff like that is legitimately threatening. Just like a kid might leave, and like as a taxpayer, you didn't sign up for that, if that makes sense. Like if you're having an English class and you start talking about philosophy and you start questioning the stuff you teach in Sunday school, right? Then you didn't, as a taxpayer, you're like, wait, hold on now, we're supposed to be writing essays. Like, why are you having these big conversations? And I feel like that's the way people feel about like America. Like if you are questioning the founding fathers, if you're questioning blah, 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 if you're questioning meritocracy and all of those kind of things, those are religious beliefs for me. And I feel like I just want you to teach thesis statements, right? I don't want you to deal in that kind of stuff. So that's me trying to give the benefit of the doubt, because that's something that I can actually wrap my head around. Like I can actually understand a parent who's like, now they're wrong, they're dead wrong, but I can understand if white supremacy, if America is a religion to you, you would react this way. And I think a lot of people, especially the best couple of years, Americana has become a religion. Like this is, and how dare you infect English class or history class with questions. So that's me doing my best to give them a shot.
Yeah, that was good.
I think there's a lot of truth in that, Matthew. And I was thinking, for me, the purpose of the anti-truth movement is to preserve white supremacy. And it is the aggressive levels in which the anti-truth movement has been well-funded and pursued is indicator that what we are doing is working, and that the consciousness is rising, that people are seeing the truth, reckoning with it, and able to actually name the characteristics of white supremacy culture, name racism, identify the systemic origins of it. And when you can name it and it's not normalized anymore, it's much easier to break down those systems that don't even need individual players to uphold it, right? So being able to have this language, more sophisticated understanding of these systems of oppression has threatened that very religious, foundation of Americana. And so on one hand, I'm disappointed by how successful it has been in a lot of ways in legislation. And at the same time, I'm motivated because I see that what we are doing is truly working and they are scared.
Yeah, that's great. And, it reminds me of a part of the conversation we had earlier today where, this idea that education has historically been used as a tool of control.
Right.
And to just blanket name, like this is a tool of control to maintain and uphold white supremacy.
Yes.
And so what our efforts in opposition are for liberation, because education should be a tool for liberation. And it should be a great and delightful journey through that liberation
exactly,
for everyone involved, right? But if it's being used as a means of control to uphold a system, then, people get mad when you try
control and cultural genocide, assimilation, right? It's a violent spirit murdering, as Bettina Love says, it is violent, right? And so we are fighting for our lives in this truth movement, right? This truth versus anti-truth. It is humanity.
Yeah, it is. That's so good. And I'm looking at the comments. Y'all are right on. They are scared. That's right. It's working and the folks are scared. And so hopefully that makes us feel even more empowered as we continue in the work, because we know that even though it's an uphill battle, it is working, as you said, Daisy, and that's really encouraging. And so kind of on that note, I wanted to bring in this other question. So the topic of the summit is we pour into us. And so we've talked about what that looks like in many ways. We've experienced it, right? I feel so poured into today. I feel overflowing and so full and so grateful. And so I'd love to hear from you all some of the more impactful or just remarkable ways you're seeing this happen in your sphere of work, particularly as it relates to this protection of truth telling in the classroom. So how are you seeing that? How are we pouring into us and taking care of each other, and maybe even share, if you'd like, some of the things you hope to see, right? You're hoping to see as we continue in this work.
Oh, okay. I'm going to touch a little on my experience as a school board member who was recalled, and in many ways driven by a lot of what we're discussing today. So issues we've brought up, longstanding, decades-long issues, the topic of renaming schools, which I've seen across the country, and removing names of slave owners and really uplifting the people who we want to acknowledge and understand their history and their work. That drove a lot of what brought us to this point of being recalled, of the money being poured in to kind of remove the work that we're doing. So I've sat with that, with how do we as a community gather and ensure that in these moments we are taking care of people enough to hold these battles when you may be the face of it. And what's happening is now teachers, sole teachers from elementary to high school across the country are being plastered all over the news for a discussion they had in their class or something they brought up that people aren't able to handle. And how we take care of ourselves and protect ourselves is that community feel, that ensuring that you can connect with folks who are like-minded, who do share the same beliefs, who have those values, and can defend that so that it's not just the one person holding it. And I was very grateful. I'm part of a group called Teachers for Social Justice that was organized and started in the Bay Area, who did things like bring me homemade meals, to check up on me, to stop by, to ensure that people aren't outside of my apartment protesting, like little to big things, but it's really that coming together. And what I hope to begin seeing more of is this building up of protection, of getting folks to be able to understand and be aligned in their messaging, because attacks are also online and they're big and they're motivated and they're organized. And if we're not in all these spaces, then we're going to continue to get beat down. And I can build a little more and talk a little more about that later. But I think that that community feel, that coming together, taking care of each other at all levels is what helped me kind of maintain this work and stay on as long as I can.
A home cooked meal does a lot. You know, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm.
For me, I have definitely felt that sense of hopelessness many times, and my response to that is community, is coming together with people who share values, who share mission, who share purpose, and collaborate, imagine what is possible. What could the future look like? What would it be like if we trusted children with the truth? That kind of innovation and progressive imagination is where I get fueled with the hope to continue and to dream big, right? So Embracing Equity is actually hosting a conference that Jose is keynoting. He's speaking on We Are Unafraid, how we speak the truth for our students. And the whole theme of this space is to be unapologetically hopeful. Right? Unapologetically hopeful. What does that look like today? And then as a personal passion project, we are launching a narrative changing early childhood education anti-racist school in the heart of Texas to model what does anti-racist teaching actually look like. What do we mean when we say anti-racist teaching? It's not a monster. If you actually look at what it is for our youngest children starting at 18 months old, it's love. It's honoring their humanity. It's celebrating who they are, right? It's being honest with them about the history and the legacy they're inheriting. It's allowing them to be change agents, right? That is what we want to pour our energy into. When I think about we pour into us, that's the inspiration I really need, and I'm hoping we can provide in that lab school.
That's wonderful.
Just one more thing I can think of is just when we find ourselves in veteran positions, like folks who've been around the block a little bit, when we're talking to young teachers or early teachers, I'll say, making sure that we're saying some of the things that people don't normally say. Like I was on the horn yesterday with an alumni of mine that says, I can't be at my school right now. Like I can't be a cop. Like all they're asking me to do is just police these. I can't do it. It's not what I education. And really feeling bad about themselves. You know what I mean? Like really up. And I'm like, I don't want to leave. I want to go. But I'm like, you can go somewhere else. And I think we don't always have that conversation. I know sometimes I'm invited in to go speak to college classes and the kids will say, well, what if the neighborhood don't let you do this? And what if the school don't let you do this? And sometimes I can tell the professor gets a little upset with me because I'm like, well, you got to keep your resume updated sometimes. Like you have to know what your capacity is before you leave this game entirely. And sometimes it's okay for you to go somewhere else because kids are wonderful everywhere. And if you're not in a place that's going to allow you to do your job, it's uncomfortable to say, but sometimes if the opportunity exists, you have to be okay being a free agent. And I think that's a lot of times that's not part of the narrative. It's all about how do you stick this out? How do you stick this out? How do you stick this out? And I think sometimes you need to be like a star NBA player sometimes and says I'm keeping my options open. Like I have to keep, I'm not going to lock into this because because if you stay too long in a place that's toxic, you'll never teach again. And that's real. Like you need to move before that happens. and that's the real. And so I think sometimes having some of those uncomfortable conversations too with the younger folks and just being like, because I remember I was on that phone yesterday talking to someone, and just kind of like, you have to leave that place and go teach somewhere else before you leave the profession. And I think that's and hopefully we got somewhere. But I think some people told me that in the past. I've told a few people, just make sure we're having some of those conversations.
I agree with that, and I think a little bit of it is tied to, as educators, the fact that we have undying labor and almost limitless to what we're going to do for our students. And I bring this up to the students that I work with now who are entering the profession, and I tell them, when you're interviewing, line up the questions of what you want the environment to be like in your workplace, and ask them, and leave those options open for yourself, because you want to be in a space that again aligns with your values, can defend you if you are somehow in the paper because of something that you taught, and can stand by you. That it just, for me, ties a little bit to having a work environment that is capable of standing by you in these moments. And it could be in schools, it could be in any place. When these attacks are underway, there's a lot of fear that fuels people's reactions and responses. Many people who you might think are for you and with you, and then turn around because it's too much pressure. So having that safety is something that I really want people to seek and understand and set up for themselves, because this work is, they'll make it feel like it's impossible.
Yeah, listening to all of those, the common thread of just the idea of the importance of dreaming. We talk a lot about this at our organization, of setting aside space to imagine the world that you want together in community, and even the acknowledgement of our own limitations that you talked about, Matthew, of, like, you are a human, you have limits, and that is okay, and move within those. And even this reminder, Gabriela, that you were just sharing about ensuring that the spaces that you're entering as a teacher are safe. All of this makes me think of the importance of just honoring our humanity as we do the work, and the fact that we are human beings and operating fully in the fullness of that humanity, the contingency, the limitations, the needs for creative imagination space, the spaciousness that we need. And so that brings me to another question I want to ask, which is a little bit in line with this, that I've been thinking about a lot this year, especially in terms of this anti-truth movement. So I'm going to try to word it as well as I can. I wrote it out a few different times to try to say it concisely, but hopefully you guys get at what I'm trying to ask. So on this call, or in this, conference, even in this panel, so many folks who are gathered here and around are faithfully offering our labor to the liberation of our communities through our work in education, to ensure that our children have what they need to thrive in a world that denies that in a lot of ways. And even with that being true, we did not create this world or many of the problems that we're now having to address, especially as it relates to the anti-truth movement. It feels so crafted and so intentionally created. We didn't create that, right? Even though we're having to deal with, taking care, right? And so I guess I'm wondering, how do we own the love and care that we have for our students and our communities without internalizing the responsibility for a problem we didn't make? And how do we uplift each other and strive for what we deserve without taking up the responsibility that really belongs to those folks and systems that created and perpetuate the problems that we're facing? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about this. This is one of those, I've spoken. This is one of the biggest. It's one of the keynotes I do all the time and stuff. It's just about hitting, not wanting to be a home run hitter, but trying to be a singles hitter. And I think it connects to what I said last time, where it says if you're in a place where it's just you, where you always feel like it's just you, even if it isn't, but if you feel like it's just you doing all this heavy lifting, and you have to save everything. You have to solve everything. And it is exhausting. But you get to a place where you're like, I'm just trying to move. I'm just trying to hit singles. I'm just trying to get to a place where I'm, sorry for the extended baseball, but like, I'm just trying to get kids home from third. Like, someone else is doing the work too. Like, we're all doing this together. And I think when you're in that kind of space, it acknowledges I don't have to solve all of this problem. I just have to get kids to love each other a little more. I just have to get kids to question things a little bit more. I just have to get like, the pressure to do everything is not on you if you find yourself in a place of like minds and you are openly saying, I don't have to do everything. I think both in your pedagogy and just like in your relationships and everything, there's like, this kid, I'm just going to try to get them a little bit more curious about this issue. And that's it. If that's all I get in ninth grade, that's all I get in ninth grade. Whoever has them in 10th grade will take over from there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to solve everything. And I think that's part of it. Like you say, like, that's where the pressure, like, I feel like I have to fix something I broke. I didn't break it. So, does that make sense? Like, I just need to get the ball moving and try to get these kids a little bit more aware of what's going on, having a little bit better conversations than they were having yesterday. That's all I need to do. And if everyone's doing that in my space, or if enough people are doing it in my space, if I'm in a community of teachers who are doing it that way, in the end, the kids will be better off for it. But I don't feel the pressure to fix something that I did not break. Like, if I hurt someone, I need to remedy that to the best of my ability. I didn't do this, so I just need to be part of a solution, but there are many parts.
I feel like a little bit of that has to be shared with newer incoming educators, because we will hold that, right? And what I've learned over the years is, and something I actually say pretty often, but in schools, we face all of the failures of those systems. So when a child can't get safe to school, or can't get to school in a safe way, they don't have access to quality healthcare or healthy foods or stable housing, all of that impacts learning. But that is not something that in a school will hold. That's not something that an educator has access to. So in this balance of the work, it's one, understanding that all of those are factors. I could have the best lesson, all of the time in the world to plan really thoughtful, engaging, creative conversations. But if my students' needs aren't met outside of this learning environment, learning is not happening. People need to understand that. And then with schools and with systems within a city, build the relationships across the other organizations and departments who can handle those things, who do have access to transportation, who do have access to, or fixing transportation, fixing the healthcare system. Again, all of the things that affect the learning that my student is doing, but understanding that as one educator, I don't have the ability to solve that. I can build the relationships with my students and my families, create that community, that family culture, and build trust so that when I have the resources, I can share them and then we can kind of tackle that together. But I've, in my own city in San Francisco, I've seen the opposite happen depending on who's leading which department, who our city's mayor is and their own beliefs. And from what I've seen, it's really had drastic consequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a really difficult dilemma that I've been grappling with, because part of me is like, burn it down. Mm-hmm. There's no way in which this system doesn't rely on the martyrdom of teachers to function. On the other hand, I hear what Matthew and Gabriela are saying with so much grace about doing your part to make whatever change you can in a community of resistance. And I really don't know what the right answer is, other than, I am really done with exploiting educators as the fix all, hold all, do it all. It's not possible. And so, I'm not sure myself on what we can do. My only hope is that we can come together and think of really transformative systemic solutions that don't rely on our individual sacrifice, literally of our health and compensation, physical, mental, emotional energy. So how do we balance all of these demands and still work toward long-term systemic change? It's more of a question in my mind.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been thinking about this question a lot, and I feel like you all brought some really helpful perspectives to it. Yeah, I don't think that our liberation should kill us, because the systems that we're resisting are designed to do just that. And so I'm always curious how we go about owning the love that shouldn't cost so much, but does because of the world that we live in, without taking on the responsibility, to we don't need to carry all of that. We didn't make these problems. And so I'm always thinking about that. So thank you for your questions and insights in that direction. I know that we're almost out of time. I have more questions I could ask, but I want to check to see if anyone has any questions for the panel. Do you guys want to ask them anything specific, anything they haven't touched on, or that we want to talk about? If not, I'll ask a last question. Let me see if anyone is asking anything. Don't give me too long, y'all. I'm asking my question. Okay, we have questions. Okay, so Hema has said, how do we hold space for multiple truths? That's a good question. What do you all think of that?
Is multiple truths like alternative truths, or what is this meaning? What is the meaning of this multiple truths?
Maybe she will clarify for us. Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
No, I just had a thought. Like sometimes, like I'm thinking in the classroom among students, it might be that two students are feeling very passionately. A conflict comes from two different kinds of data that are being valued equally that shouldn't be. Like some kids have anecdotal information. Like I always use the example of like one kid, their parent is a police officer, and another kid lives in a community where they feel like they live under an occupying force of police officers. And both of them can tell very true stories. My father does this, my father does that. When I walk down the street, I feel this. When I walk down the street, I feel this. And to both of them, neither one of them is lying, right? Neither one of them is saying anything, but what we struggle with sometimes as a teacher is figuring out how do we teach kids to look at the relative importance of different kinds of data for certain moments. Like if we're having a systemic conversation about police brutality, your relationship with your father is irrelevant. Does that make sense? If we're having a conversation about the fear that you feel on a one-on-one level when your father leaves for work every day, it is relevant. Like it just like it, but different people. The problem is the adult world does not operate like that in discussions. It's like the thing I feel, and which means the thing I feel is the only way to feel, and it is relevant in every conversation. Which sometimes like how you feel about your parent being a cop is completely irrelevant in many conversations. Similarly, how you feel in a community that feels over policed is not relevant to their family conversation. It's not relevant. So both sides can feel this, one side more than other in certain things. But I think the inability to figure out what kind of data, it's not about truth. Now, it's not about what truth. It's what kind of data matters most in a particular conversation, whether it's anecdotal, whether it's statistics, whether it's anything else, is something that is it should be a teacher's wheelhouse. That's teaching. Like that's teaching. That is teaching. That doesn't matter. This matters. And here's why. Let's do this discussion. That's academic. It's not political. That's academic. That is just like what kind of data matters. I don't care how you feel about vaccines. I don't care what the blah, blah, blah. This is what data says. I don't care about how you feel. Like that's education. And I think there aren't multiple truths as per se. It's more about like making sure neither kid feels like they're being told they're a liar when they're speaking their truth. And instead of calling kids liars, we're making sure that we are teaching them why certain kinds of truth matter in certain situations, or certain kinds of data, matters in certain situations.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. That emphasis on critical thinking skills is really important. And I want the panelists to answer if they want, but I actually have a response myself in my work in religious spaces. This comes up a lot, of this inability to hold multiple truths, because like a lot of religious spaces, particularly in the West, particularly Christianity, which is what a lot of my background is in, has no framework for this. And so one of the things I think is important is, from a very young age, if we are able to, within ourselves, to our inner child, and also to our children, dismantle this need for certainty, which is a figment of like the white supremacist imperialist imagination. And in most places in cultures historically was just not needed. Like this idea of an empirical truth, there is only one. And so an ability to just release that and be totally comfortable with our, reckoning with the data to land us in a place of understanding a truth that is true, and also exists with this reckoning with the data by another, embodied human, right? That is also true. Those things can mutually exist. The fact that that is so untenable in our Western imagination is not accidental. And so I think that this like release of certainty, the need for certainty, helps a lot and has been a challenge to help people understand, particularly in some of the spaces where I've worked. Gabriela, did you want to jump in and say something?
Just that I also feel that we as adults have been unable to disagree with each other and with our own truth. So just kind of, building on what was just shared, once you're able to discuss and define your truth, you might find the lie, or you might find, well, this is actually rooted in something that's very racist, which is why it's wrong. But even that ability to discuss, it has been so difficult for people. And so instead of having a discussion, we're separating and falling on either side and having the reasons why we believe what we believe. And what we're trying to do with this movement and with this work and engaging young people is breaking that, having these discussions. I've heard discussions amongst young people and have seen these debates, but building that critical thinking and that ability to have conversations that with people who might not agree with your truth, but let's figure out what that is. And then maybe even if they'll still disagree, there's a little bit of an understanding.
Yeah, that's great. Well, no one has turned us
And
off.
a lot of times, oh,
to add time. Oh no, Matthew, go ahead. You can have the last word.
no,
Please do.
oh, sorry about that. I think a lot of times we do, especially in the classroom, we limit things to agree or disagree. Like that is the dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you agree with this? We see it on many issues. Like that is, stand on this side of the room if you feel this. Stand on this side of the room if you feel this. And that's the lesson plan, right? And it's like, that's not a conversation. Like all the kids are going to do is yell back and like there's nothing there. So that agree or disagree framing, especially when we're dealing with which set of data we're using, is a horrible framing. Like it's like there's so many better questions to ask than agree or disagree when it comes to each other's truth, right? It's about like, where'd you get that from? Like, where does this come from? What does that lead to? Blah, 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 blah. And that's how people discover. I've had so many kids like, it's race. Like this, I like them struggling. Maybe that comes from racist ideas, but let them come to that from having to defend it, not from just yelling because of agree or disagree. Just like, where does that come from is a powerful framing instead of agree or disagree. But I see that all of the time. How many of the things that show up in the news are because a teacher said agree or disagree? Agree or disagree, slavery was wrong. That goes viral every single year. Every single year. Agree or disagree, slavery.
Why are we asking this?
Every every year. And I'm like, that's not what you meant to ask. You meant for kids to engage the important role that enslavement of humans meant to the founding of this country, and could we have existed without it? That's the question you wanted them to struggle with. Instead, you wrote, do you agree slavery is wrong? And it's like, no, that's not the truth. That's not it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Agree or disagree is a bad prompt. It's an awful prompt.
Never gonna go well.
Retire it.
This was such a nurturing. Daisy, I wanted to just tap to you. Do you have any last things that you want to say? I know that
No, well, thank you so much for all of this truth telling today. I'm really grateful that I could be part of it.
Yeah, me too. This was so nurturing. And one of the things I'm reminded of is that part of the ways that we resist, which is what I'm always after, like, how do we resist this? Is with spaces like this, where we are creatively imagining how to do something different and how to do, teaching and nurturing of our communities, of our students well. And so I'm so thankful for all of your wisdom and insights, and turn it back over to Jose, who's popped in.
I would love for everyone in the chat to please give it up for our fabulous moderator, Cami King, and of course our participants, Daisy Han, Gabriela Lopez, and Matthew K. What a phenomenal and star-studded panel. Give it up, y'all. We have a few minutes, and then we're going to hear from some wonderful, wonderful policymakers / advocates, and I really hope that y'all get to enjoy us. Thanks, y'all. See you soon.